Traders, how are you? With Marcello, founder of the Day Trading Academy, co-founder of Speed Up. Got a lot going on in the world. We're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. We have wars in Russia and Ukraine. We have winter storms all the way even in Athens, which is really unusual. The bomb cyclone right now that's canceling thousands of flights in the US. But we do have good news. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Medellin, Colombia. Let's get started. Main thing for the week, this prospect of war in Russia with Ukraine. There's a bit of an unusual situation in that we've had this kind of happen before, right? With Crimea, which is the island on the water there, which was technically part of Ukraine. Now, the United States during the Obama administration simply just let Russia go in there and take Crimea from Ukraine. They just walked in and now it's like it's always been Russia's. So now we have a repeat of this, but the only difference now is that Russia is starting to lay the foundation for literally a war, where when they went into Crimea, they didn't set, for example, hospitals or health facilities or radar facilities. And they're starting to see a lot of that now with Russia. So if they're setting up, for example, health centers for possibly wounded troops, that means that they're literally getting ready to pop off. So that's something that it looks pretty serious right now. And even the NATO countries, in other words, the countries that are part of NATO, which is the military alliance essentially of the left, are saying that they're not going to allow the US to launch troops from their countries. So literally, it kind of seems like the US is going this on their own. Now, in addition to that, we have the aggressive monetary policy tightening from the US Fed, which basically means that the central government is going to stop supporting the economy. They're going to stop injecting money by buying the bonds. And in addition to that, they're going to start raising rates. And part of the reason why we see this huge drop so far in the beginning of the year is precisely because of what people think in regards to the rates. So fundamentally, the stock market is considered a more risky investment because the returns are variable, meaning that stocks, they go up and down. Whereas the bonds and the US dollar, quote unquote, is the best investment because it's a secure return on your investment because they always pay the fixed amount. Now, we're not going to get into the inflation aspect where the interest that they're paying on the bonds is less than actual inflation, which means that people who will put their money in the dollar are actually losing in the end. That we won't touch right now. But part of the reason why we're seeing this big drop is precisely for that reason. The United States Central Bank is saying, hey, we're going to raise the interest rates. We're going to come back the asset purchases, which means that the dollar strength goes up, which means that people take money out of the stocks. They put them into the bonds and the US dollar. And that's why we've seen that big drop. Now, this week, however, was a turn of events. We had the Dow go up 1.41%. We had the S&P 500 go up 0.77%. And then the NASDAQ, we saw it go up by 0.01%. And one of the things I thought was really interesting is during the entire pandemic, which started in 2020, the world's 10 richest men saw their fortune double. And there was a new billionaire created every 26 hours. There's the reason why they don't want this to end. Well, whatever side you're on, whether it's, we're not going to talk about conspiracy theories. The fact of the matter is, pandemic started. We had government shutting this down. We have the UK and also Ireland, Denmark, are removing every single restriction. No, passes for the thing in your arm, no masks, absolutely nothing. Kind of like how we've been in Florida for the last year. But you can see why they don't want to let it go because they're just getting richer off of this, right? So why wouldn't they just keep it the same? Overseas market news, the European markets were mostly lower with the Euro stocks being the most negative of all at 2.14%. Latin America and Canadian markets were mostly mixed. Canada went up 0.55%. You guys have probably heard about the huge trucker, the world record for the longest trucker. I forgot what that's called in English. The huge trucker, it's not an embargo, but it's basically like a protest. So there's a huge thousands of trucks that are driving towards Ottawa. It's a world record now to protest the anti-pandemic mandates. Africa and the Middle East, Egypt, biggest loser of all at 2.01% negative. And then we also have Asia and Australia. The Kospi in South Korea, the biggest loser there at 6.41%. Bitcoin and cryptocurrency news. Bitcoin is taking quite a wall up. There's been $600 billion in Bitcoin and $1 trillion in cryptocurrencies collapse since November. We're talking about market valuation, but this week we did see a bit of a recovery. In the beginning of the week, we had a huge move down, and then we saw the recovery. And for the end of the week, it went up by 3.76%. It's just over 37,000. And one of the interesting pieces of news this week was that according to Visa, the payment processor, right, the credit cards and the debit cards, they're saying that 82% of small businesses are planning to accept digital payments this year, where 25% are expecting to start accepting Bitcoin payments, which I thought was pretty interesting. The U.S. government is also talking about, the Biden administration is talking about, they're going to regulate Bitcoin as a matter of national security. And even in Colombia, the beautiful city of Medellin, I recommend you guys come here and visit. They are even talking about their IRS or their tax identity for the government, are saying that the profits from Bitcoin have to be taxed. And so now you guys can see, I've been talking about this from the beginning, where everybody was telling me it can't be regulated. And it kind of seems like we're going to start getting some regulation when it comes to the Bitcoin. Other than that, commodities, oil prices up to a 7-year high this week. U.S. crude went up 1.97%, $86.82. How you liking that $4 gas, guys? International Brent 2.43% at $90.03. Turkey. The industrial zones in Turkey now are going 3 days without electric. So they're starting to have blackouts there as well due to a shortage of natural gas that's coming in from Iran. If you guys remember, I believe it was 3 weeks ago, we talked about how Serbia and Kosovo were having blackouts due to the situation with the French power plants that went down. And then in addition to that, we also had other countries now, for example, Turkey, that are starting to get these blackouts. And if you guys remember, the capital of Germany, which was Berlin, yeah, it's Berlin. I had a brain fart there for a second. They were even starting to have some blackouts in some neighborhoods as well. So hopefully it doesn't continue, because we're in the middle of the winter, especially in the northern hemisphere, right? Canada, the US, all of Europe, Russia. And we need a lot more energy to be able to keep warm. Malaysia palm oil futures fell from a record high on Monday due to profit taking. If you guys don't know, palm oil is an oil that comes from palm trees. And 85% of the global supply of the palm oil comes from Malaysia and Indonesia. Now, if you didn't know, more than 50% of all packaged products has palm oil in it. It's natural. It's a great natural product that they put in a lot of things. Everything from pizza, chocolate, deodorant, shampoo, even toothpaste. And now we have Indonesia, which is the largest producer of the palm oil, starting to restrict or have plans to restrict the export of this palm oil. So the largest producer of one of the main products that goes into the majority of the things that we go and buy in the supermarket is literally going to start restricting the production and restricting the export. That means much higher prices, because if the largest exporter, the largest producer, isn't going to provide this product, which is essential in a lot of the goods that we buy, that means that the price is going to go up, which means that inflation is going to get even worse. It's not going to get better. And on top of that, we could have a situation where they can't find the palm oil to put in these products, right? So then we're going to have even more empty shelves than a lot of you guys have been talking about and seeing. And, I asked you guys last week to talk about that in the comments, and a lot of you left comments, so I appreciate that. Other than that, in D.C., the District of Columbia, a lot of the governments are trying to limit the supermarket purchases as empty shelves persist as well, telling people, quote, only buy what you need. So far in the majority of Florida, I know a lot of people in Florida, we don't have any outages there, but it does kind of seem to be affecting more rural areas first. It seems like they're diverting everything into the cities to maybe not cause panic or something, right? Maybe the preppers were right. You should prepare yourself. Other than that, lumber futures fell by the exchange limit at the CME on Tuesday, heading for their 7th straight decline. It's the longest slump in July, so if you're going to start a construction project, now would probably be the time. In addition to that, precious metals collapsed this week. Gold went down 2.45% to $1,792, while silver went down over 8% to $22.56. And then finance and banking news, the Australian Bureau of Statistics announced that inflation rose 1.3% in quarter four and 3.5% for the year, which is the fastest increase in an annual pace since 2014. Now remember, the government numbers for inflation, the vast majority of times don't include all the things that we pay for. For example, the United States inflation report doesn't include food or energy because obviously we don't need to buy any food or energy, right? So if in the US right now, if it's 5 or 6% inflation that the government's reporting, if we would have taken the same calculation that we used in 1980 now, because they changed in the 1990s, our inflation right now would actually be 15%. So we're hitting records even with the government dummying the numbers. Just keep that in mind. And I just want to reiterate to you as well, I think 2 weeks I told you how Domino's Pizza was selling before 10 wings for $10.99. And now they're selling 8 wings for $10.99. So you guys can see there's a 20% increase literally in what you're paying for, because even though you're still paying $10.99 for wings, you're getting 8 instead of 10. Right? And this year in 2022, the federal government and the central bank is starting to admit that the inflation is not as temporary as what they were trying to have everybody believe, right? You and I talked about how this is going to get much, much worse very quickly. And so now this year in 2022, a lot of these companies are going to start passing the cost to their consumers. So if we saw an unofficial, what I think the inflation rate of 20-30% last year, we're going to see an actual inflation rate of probably 50%, 40-50% this year. So start that side hustle. In addition to that, political news, Burkina Faso, which is a country in Africa, ousted their president, Roch Kabore. They suspended the constitution, dissolved the government and the National Assembly, and they closed the country's borders. Wednesday, the sources close to this U.S. Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer, which is an 83-year-old senior court of the member's 3-member liberal bloc, decided that he's going to retire during his current term in June, just before the elections, as a lot of people are saying that the congressional elections this year is going to change hands. Remember that the Democrats right now, the left controls the presidency, also all of Congress. So they literally run it all. In economic news, South Korea's economy grew at the fastest pace in 11 years in 2021 due to record exports. One of the things that I find really funny is how, for example, here in Colombia, which is more left-leaning or socialist compared to South Korea, which is more capitalist, they have the same population, pretty much, maybe by a million or two difference. But South Korea is literally the 9th largest exporter in the world by only having, 50, 60 million people. Singapore's economy went up by 7.2% in 2021, which is the biggest growth in a decade, rebounding from a contraction of 5.4%. U.S. GDP expanded by 1.7% in the last quarter, while the GDP jumped at its largest annual increase since 1984, 6.9%. However, one of the things that the government, same thing with the inflation numbers, right? They'll come out and say, no, we've had the greatest economic numbers since 1984. But the reality is what's happening is since we had such a big contraction because of the pandemic, more than half of the expansion or that good number is literally people rebuilding their inventory. So if you divide that in half, we're talking about, 3.5-ish, 3.4-ish, something like that, which is more kind of the normal number that we've seen over the years. Germany's economy, largest in Europe and 4th largest in the world, saw a contraction that was larger than expected in quarter four, even though they're expected to expand 2.8% in 2021, which is still pretty good. They're starting to get weighed down by all the restrictions. Remember that the UK and also Denmark are removing all restrictions in regards to the pandemic, masks, the pass with the things that go in your arm, absolutely everything, kind of like we've had in Florida for the last year. And then in France, 7th largest economy in the world, grew by 0.7% in the fourth quarter. The full year expansion is at a 5-decade high at 7%. And Spain, which is the 14th largest country in the world, 14th largest economy in the world, exceeded expectations as well. They grew by 5% last year in 2021. Corporate news, Samsung went down 2.73%. Even though they reported a record amount of operating profit and revenue, they made $11.5 billion in quarter four, which is the highest profit for them in a quarter, and $42.9 billion in the year of 2021. And the company Block, which was founded by Twitter's Jack Dorsey, formerly called Square, their trading stocks went down in Australia by 5.35% on Thursday, as Apple is now planning to allow merchants to receive payments with a phone tap, right, rather than using these third-party merchants like Square. Tesla also saw their shares plunge to $806. It's the lowest level since October 14th, admitting that the supply chains are going to start affecting their operations in addition to new vehicle launches in 2022. So because of that, they went down by quite a bit, because obviously they can't make cars and sell new cars, and they aren't going to be able to make a profit. Not a lot of trade news and technology this week. In investment news, Netflix went up 7.51% after dropping 30% after the popular investor Bill Ackman invested over $1 billion, which was over 3.1 million shares into Netflix. And then Apple went up almost 7% after they had their best quarter ever in terms of revenue, went up by 11%, $123.9 billion, despite all the problems with the supply challenges and the effects of the pandemic. And then in the international news, obviously, we still have this tit for tat with Russia and a lot of the West. The UK is now accusing Russia of trying to install a pro-Russian president. In addition, that Russia is denying that it's going to invade parts of Ukraine. The U.S. State Department recommended that all U.S. citizens in Ukraine depart immediately due to the extraordinary military buildup from Russia on the border. On Monday as well, the Department of Defense announced that they're going to put 2 U.S. aircraft carriers in the disputed South China Sea for training. If you guys don't know what's going on there, essentially there are international waters that are agreed upon between countries, let's say. And so they're taking a huge swath of that South China Sea, which encroaches into some of the waters, territorial waters of other countries. And obviously that's part of their, let's call it military expansion. And also, obviously, they want to take Ukraine. And in addition to that, North Korea also sent the most amount of missile launches this month ever. So they're starting 2022 with a display of their new hardware. And in unusual facts this week, in a rare event, Greek capital of Athens is getting snow again. A lot of people, hundreds of people were displaced due to the situation with the snow, and people were trapped in their cars. This is the second consecutive year of snowstorms now. And if you guys didn't notice already, in the US, we've had these really freak snowstorms already. And this is going to get worse. As I told you guys a few years ago, we're going to see the next 10 years a lot of economic problems, a lot of social problems, and in addition to that, a lot of natural disasters, in my opinion, as well. That's it for this week, guys. Let me know if you have any questions. Don't forget to hit the like button. That hasn't gone up in price yet. And if you guys have any questions, don't forget to leave the hashtag #AskMarcello. See you next week.